Hello, this is Christine from the Writing Center. I'm going to show you how to apply APA-style 7th edition formatting in PowerPoint. I will begin with the title slide. When you open a new PowerPoint presentation, you'll see a title slide with pre-formatted areas to add text. Since APA-style student papers begin with a title page, we can adapt the title page guidelines to a title slide. Click on the placeholder text to type on the slide. The title goes in bold font on a paper, so we'll do that here too. Select the text and click Bold on the text toolbar. For papers, the font style must be legible and consistent and accessible throughout, and the same can be applied to presentations. So Arial and Calibri are appropriate for an APA-style presentation. But the font size recommended for papers is too small for a presentation, which is a visual work intended for overhead display or for reading on various sized screens and mobile devices. A best practice in PowerPoint is a font of at least 24 points for body text and a larger font for headings and the title. Using the default font for your PowerPoint theme is generally appropriate. I'm going to use a plain styled theme with the default Calibri font. If you apply a theme that has a design, you'll see the formatting, including the font style, will change. Within a theme, there are color scheme options as well. You can also use a theme for the background design, but then manually change the font style to match an APA-style presentation, such as by centering the title slide information. For this example, I'm going to use the default theme and font. The placeholder for a subtitle in PowerPoint is below the title, but here's a tip for an APA-style presentation. Use that subtitle placeholder for the other elements needed on this slide, and instead put the subtitle after a colon in the title box. On a paper, the title page is double-spaced, but just as we adapt the font size to what is best for a slideshow, we can adapt spacing to the slide. I'm going to keep the default spacing for this title slide layout. The author's name goes below the title, and the next line provides the affiliated university. Then provide the course, instructor name, and due date. Here is an example. The title and subtitle are on top, and then we have the author name. Next is the university, and the course number and name. You can usually find this information on the course syllabus. When providing the instructor name, include the instructor's preferred honorific, such as doctor or professor, or omit that if the instructor doesn't use a title. The date format is month, day, year. Finally, an APA paper includes page numbers, so we will use slide numbers. On the Insert tab, select Slide Number to open the header and footer options, and check the slide number box, and then select Apply to All. And just as on a paper, when you use this insert tool, the numbers will advance on subsequent slides. And that is an APA-style title slide for a presentation. Let's look at how to format a body slide using APA style. On the Insert tab, click New Slide, and you'll see your options for body slide layouts. Let's start with the most standard layout with a title and content box. Use the Preview pane on the left to see the slide you are working on. On the View tab, this is also the normal view. APA style helps writers think critically, communicate clearly and precisely, and document sources ethically, and this applies to presentations in APA style too. Slides should present information clearly and plainly, have a slide title that reflects the main point of the slide, and slide text that is unified on that point, providing details, examples, or other data that develops or supports that main point. As an academic presentation, everything on the slide should be relevant, cited if from a source, and well edited. My list begins with a narrative in text citation, since each of my points comes from a source. follow the same guidelines as for papers when paraphrasing, quoting, and summarizing information from sources. If only one of my points came from a source, I would have used a parenthetical citation at the end of that point. Similar to writing a paper, it's a best practice to conduct your research and create an outline and draft of your information before beginning your PowerPoint, so that you already have a thesis for your presentation along with an organizational plan and key points for the slides. Applying APA Styles guidelines for lists to a PowerPoint slide, list related key points using bullet points. Number the points to show a hierarchy or a chronology. A key feature of listing in APA style is also to use parallelism, which means to repeat the syntactical structures of adjacent words, sentences, and clauses. For example, each of my points begins with a present tense verb, and each point is also a simple sentence. Parallelism creates uniformity. It unifies the points, making the information more cohesive, logical, and easier to read and understand. When editing your presentation, always check for parallelism and where you can use it to make the slide content clearer and more unified. When the points are complete sentences, also use standard capitalization and punctuation. Another option is to capitalize and punctuate the list like it's one long sentence, beginning with a capital letter, using commas or semicolons if one of the list items already has commas, using a conjunction before the last point, and ending with a period. You can also make lists using simple phrases without punctuation. Note that I still cite content that comes from a source and still use parallel structure. Each of these items begins with a noun phrase followed by a prepositional phrase beginning with for. Let's look at how to add visual elements to your APA style presentation. I'm using a two-content layout here. I did this by inserting a new slide and selecting two content from the layout menu. I've used the left content box for my list of key points and the right content box for my figure. You can create figures using the Smart Art or chart tools in PowerPoint. The content box has shortcuts to these tools, or you will find them on the Insert tab. I want to add a pie chart. Once I click OK, a sheet will pop up for my data. You can add more data points or take away data points as needed. I typed a new title and filled in the content cells for an example. Click the X in the corner of the data sheet to close that out. My objective is to show you the APA style elements for using a figure. In APA style, figures have a figure number, a title, the figure itself, and when needed, a note under the figure that provides any definitions or a key that explains any elements or data in the figure that wouldn't be obvious by the title or the figure itself. To add the figure label, I put my cursor next to the title and clicked Enter twice to create a double-spaced line. I typed the word figure in bold font and gave it a number based on the sequence of figures in my presentation. This is my first figure, so it's figure 1. Then on the next line, the title goes in italics and uses title case. Another APA style guideline is to use a callout in the text that points the viewer to the figure, but this may not be needed on a PowerPoint slide that is featuring the figure. If the guidelines for a paper seem not to make sense for a PowerPoint, then use your best judgment. Finally, for figures that need explanation, a note goes below the figure. This PowerPoint pie chart already provides a key for the colors, but we can put this key in APA style for the sake of an example. I'm going to begin by creating a text box for my note. On the Insert tab, select Text Box, and the mouse pointer will turn into crosshairs for creating a text box. Place the crosshairs where you want the box and drag the crosshairs to create a rectangle. I want to type over the PowerPoint key, so I'm going to fill the shape with a white background. I can do this on the Format tab. Now I can type my note. The word note begins with a capital letter and is in italics and is followed by a period. The note itself goes in regular font and also ends with a period. I have room on my slide to move the figure up and double space the note as I would on a paper, but if doing so would have compromised the clarity of the image, I would not have. I would have left it single-spaced. Tables follow the same formatting guidelines as figures, only instead of a figure number, you have a table number. Now, if you use someone else's data in your table, a copyright statement would also be needed in the note that identifies the copyright holder of the information, and a corresponding reference list entry would also be required for that source. Unlike copyrighted images, it's fine to use data from your research in your presentation, as long as you have that copyright statement and reference entry. I'll show you an example of a copyright statement coming up. While we cannot use copyrighted images in our presentations without the permission of the copyright holder, there are sites that provide free images. Sites such as Pixabay, Pexels, or Unsplash do not require attribution to the author, so a copyright statement is not required or expected in APA style. If you were only using an image for decoration and not as part of your academic research presentation, you also would not need a figure number or title for the image. But in an APA style presentation that presents your research, your images should be relevant to the discussion and not purely decoration. Creative Commons images are also okay to use in your presentations, but these images do require a copyright statement which goes in the note under the image. There are several types of Creative Commons licenses. The license type will be provided on the site where you retrieved the image. The copyright statement, as shown in the example, begins with from or adapted from if you cropped or modified the image. Then the title of the image in title case and italic font, then in brackets the type of image it is. In this example, it's a photograph. In other examples, it might be an infographic or artwork. Then the word by and the author's name, the publication year, the site where the image is located online, and then the URL in parentheses, and finally the license type. Images in the public domain, such as photographs with expired copyrights, are also okay to use in your presentation, but they also need a copyright statement in the note. You can find public domain images on the NASA website, the Smithsonian website, and by searching the web for public domain images. And those are some examples of body slides using APA style. Let's look at how to format a reference list on a PowerPoint slide. Any PowerPoint that includes information from sources requires a reference list with a reference entry for each source cited or noted. To create a reference list, begin with a new slide and type your references following APA Style 7th edition. I labeled the list References using bold font and centered it. My objective is to show you the formatting of this list and not the individual reference formats, which vary. I type my list in the main content box, then select and delete the title box and drag the content box up to create a top margin that looks equal with the side margins. Reference entries in APA style are double-spaced, so I will apply that here since I only have a few entries. I select the entries and apply double spacing using the line spacing menu in the paragraph section of the Home tab. APA style references also use hanging indentations. With hanging indentations, the first line of the entry is aligned with the margin, and any subsequent lines in that entry are indented. You can do this a couple ways. I'm going to use the ruler to do this. If you do not see a ruler on your slide, you can select the ruler view on the View tab. Now when I select the entries, I will see the tabs on the ruler, and I click my mouse just on the bottom tab and drag it over a ½ inch. Reference entries do not use bullet points or any numbering. The entries are alphabetized by the first word of the entry or first major word if the first word were a, an, or the. Use smaller font or multiple slides to fit all your references if you have more than a few. And that is it. I hope this video helps you format your next presentation in APA style. Thanks for watching.